The winter of 1837 was remembered as one of the harshest to ever strike the American frontier. When Thomas Reed left his homestead in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains to secure provisions for his family, he promised his wife Sarah that he'd return within a fortnight. 3 weeks later, with supplies dwindling and temperatures plummeting to deadly lows, Sarah Reed stood at the cabin door with her 3 young sons huddled behind her. Watching as another snowstorm obscured the horizon, Thomas was nowhere to be seen. What Sarah couldn't know was that her husband's body lay frozen in a ravine 20 miles south, his wagon overturned, his supplies scattered across the icy landscape. Abandoned by fate, Sarah and her boys faced a death sentence as provisions ran out and the merciless winter closed in around them. Their salvation would come from an unexpected source, a Cherokee family who risked everything to save these strangers, forever altering the course of both families' legacies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Reed had never considered herself a frontiersman's wife. Growing up in the comparative comfort of a small town in Virginia, she had known little of the hardships that defined life on the edge of the wilderness. But when she married Thomas Reed, a man with dreams as vast as the unexplored territories west of the Appalachians, she had embraced his vision of carving out a new life for themselves. "We'll build something lasting, Sarah," Thomas had promised on their wedding day, his blue eyes bright with conviction. "A place where our children can grow surrounded by God's green earth, not choked by the smoke of factories." Thomas was a tall man with calloused hands and a quiet determination that commanded respect. Unlike many who ventured west with grand illusions and little practical knowledge, Thomas had apprenticed with a carpenter before learning the ways of farming and hunting. He was methodical, careful, and above all, prepared, or so Sarah had thought. The Reed homestead sat nestled in a small clearing, amid sprawling forests at the base of rolling foothills that eventually rose to become the imposing Appalachian Mountains. They had arrived in spring of 1836, nearly 2 years ago, when the landscape was alive with possibility. Thomas had labored tirelessly to build their modest cabin before winter, while Sarah had tended to their firstborn, James, then just 4 years old. In the seasons that followed, Sarah had given birth to William, now 4, and little Henry, barely 2. The boys filled the small cabin with laughter and chaos in equal measure. James, the oldest at 6, had inherited his father's thoughtful nature, his eyes taking in the world with quiet contemplation. William was as wild as the surrounding wilderness, always in motion, always searching for adventure. Henry, still toddling, about the cabin, watched his older brothers with wide eyes, eager to join their exploits. The winter of 1837 had announced itself early, with the first snow falling before the harvest was fully gathered. Thomas had frowned at the grey sky one October morning, his breath forming clouds in the crisp air. "This isn't right," he had muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. "Winter's coming too soon." That night, as the children slept, Thomas and Sarah had taken inventory of their supplies by candlelight. The tension in Thomas's shoulders told Sarah everything she needed to know before he spoke. "We're short, Sarah," he admitted, his voice low. "The early frost took more of the crops than I'd feared. We've got enough dried meat for maybe a month, flour and preserves for a bit longer." Sarah felt a flicker of fear, quickly suppressed. "What do we do?" "There's a trading post about 4 days' journey south," Thomas replied, tracing the route on a crude map spread before them. "I can take the wagon and be back within 2 weeks, weather permitting." "Is it safe to travel now?" Sarah asked, glancing toward the window where snowflakes drifted past the glass. Thomas's hesitation spoke volumes, but his words were confident. "I've made the journey before. The first snow doesn't make the trail impassable, and we need the supplies." Better to go now than when the real winter sets in. 3 days later, as dawn broke cold and clear, Thomas loaded the wagon with items to trade. Furs trapped the previous winter, handcrafted wooden tools, and a small pouch of silver coins saved for emergencies. Sarah stood in the doorway, Henry balanced on her hip, while James and William flanked her sides. "Remember what I taught you," Thomas told James solemnly, kneeling to meet his eldest son at eye level. "You're to help your mother while I'm gone. Keep the woodpile stocked, tend to the animals." James nodded earnestly, his small shoulders squaring with the responsibility. Thomas turned to William, ruffling his unruly brown hair. "Mind your mother and your brother, wild one. No adventures without permission." William's reluctant, "Yes, Pa," brought a smile to Thomas's face. Finally, Thomas rose and faced Sarah, taking Henry's chubby hand in his. 2 weeks, he promised. No more. If the weather turns, I'll shelter at the trading post until it's safe. To return, Sarah nodded, fighting back tears that threatened to freeze on her cheeks. "We'll be fine," she assured him, a lie they both recognized but accepted. Thomas kissed her then, his lips warm against hers despite the bitter cold. His final embrace was quick. Thomas had never been a man comfortable with lingering farewells. And then he was climbing onto the wagon seat, taking up the reins. 2 weeks, he repeated, and then the wagon lurched forward, the horses' hooves breaking through the thin crust of snow. Sarah watched until the wagon disappeared around a bend in the trail, the boys silent beside her. Only when Thomas was truly gone did she usher them back into the warmth of the cabin, forcing a brightness into her voice she didn't feel. "Well then," she announced, "who's hungry for breakfast?" The first week passed in the steady rhythm of frontier life. Sarah maintained their routine with iron discipline, chores in the morning, simple lessons for the boys in reading and figures midday, stories by the fire in the evening. The snow continued to fall intermittently, but never with the fury that would come later. By the 10th day, Sarah began to watch the trail with increasing frequency. By the 14th day, when Thomas had promised to return, she spent hours at the window, straining to hear the creak of wagon wheels or the whinny of horses. On the 17th day, a blizzard descended upon the mountains with savage intensity. Wind howled around the cabin like a living thing, finding every crack and crevice in the chinking between logs. Snow piled against the walls until the windows showed nothing but white. "Is Pa lost in that?" William asked, his usual bravado absent, as they huddled close to the fire. "No," Sarah replied firmly. "Your father is smart. He would have stayed at the trading post when he saw the weather turning." She didn't voice her fear that Thomas might have been caught between destinations with no shelter but the wagon itself. Such thoughts were luxuries she couldn't afford, not with 3 young boys looking to her for strength. As the 3rd week without Thomas stretched into the 4th, Sarah implemented strict rationing. Meals grew smaller, the cabin colder as she conserved firewood. Each morning she rose before the boys to check their dwindling supplies, calculating and recalculating how long they might last. The answer was never enough. On a rare, clear day, Sarah bundled the boys in every available layer and led them outside to gather more firewood. The snow had drifted higher than William's head in places, and even James struggled to navigate the deep white wilderness that had once been their yard. "Look for fallen branches," Sarah instructed, her own arms already laden with wood. "Nothing. Too heavy, and stay within sight of me." They worked in silence, their breath hanging in clouds around their heads. It was James who spotted the tracks first. "Ma," he called, his voice hushed with either fear or excitement. "Someone's been here." Sarah dropped her wood and rushed to his side, heart pounding. The tracks were clear, human footprints much larger than any her boys could make, heading toward the forest edge. For a wild moment, hope surged through her. "Thomas?" But the tracks came from the wrong direction, not from the trail south where Thomas would return, but from the west, deeper in the mountains where no settlements existed. At least, no white settlements. "Inside," Sarah ordered, suddenly alert, to dangers beyond starvation and cold. "Now." The boys didn't question her urgency, scrambling toward the cabin with armfuls of wood. Sarah cast one last look at the mysterious tracks before following, her mind racing. The mountains harbored Cherokee villages, she knew, though Thomas had assured her when they settled that relations were peaceful. But with tensions rising throughout the frontier and rumors of forced relocations, Sarah couldn't be certain of anything. That night, she retrieved Thomas's rifle from its hiding place above the door and loaded it with trembling hands after the boys were asleep. She had fired it only a handful of times during Thomas's patient lessons and doubted her ability to hit anything beyond point-blank range. Still, the solid weight of it provided some comfort as she positioned herself in the rocking chair facing the door. Sleep claimed her despite her vigilance, the exhaustion of worry and hunger too powerful to resist. She woke with a start hours later, disoriented in the pre-dawn darkness. Something had roused her, a sound outside the cabin. Sarah strained her ears, the rifle clutched to her chest. There it was again, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps. In snow, circling the cabin, not animal but human. Deliberate. Her first instinct was to wake the boys, to huddle them in the corner furthest from the door and windows. But wisdom prevailed. Better to let them sleep, unaware and unafraid, while she faced whatever threat approached. Rising silently from the chair, Sarah positioned herself beside the window, carefully pulling back the edge of the rough cloth that served as a curtain. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, casting a ghostly blue glow across the snow. At first, she saw nothing. Then a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a mixture of traditional Cherokee clothing and items of European origin. His long black hair was partially covered by a fur cap, his face stern but not threatening as he surveyed the cabin. Behind him, a woman appeared, her movements graceful despite the heavy pack she carried. Sarah watched, frozen in indecision. They made no aggressive moves, simply studying the cabin with careful consideration. The woman said something to the man, gesturing toward the thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney. He nodded, then reached into his pack and withdrew something Sarah couldn't identify in the dim light. When he began to approach the cabin directly, Sarah's nerve broke. She abandoned her observation post and moved to the door, rifle raised. Her hands shook so badly she feared the weapon might discharge accidentally. "Stop right there," she called through the door, hoping her voice sounded stronger than she felt. "I have a rifle." The footsteps paused. A moment of silence followed. Then a deep voice responded in accented but clear English. "We bring food. You are hungry." Sarah's breath caught. Not a threat, but an offer of help. Suspicion warred with desperate need inside her. "How do you know that?" she demanded. "We watch," came the simple reply. 3 days, no hunting. Small. Smoke. Children think. They had been observing the cabin, Sarah realized with a chill, watching as she and the boys grew weaker, as their situation became more dire. "My husband will return soon," she lied, needing them to believe she wasn't alone and vulnerable. A pause then. "No. Found wagon. Man dead. Creek Valley." The words struck Sarah like physical blows. She stumbled back from the door, the rifle suddenly too heavy to hold. It clattered to the wooden floor as her legs gave way beneath her. Thomas, dead. The certainty crashed through her denials and hopes, ringing with terrible truth. Why else would he not have returned? Deep down, she had known, had felt it in the hollow place beneath her ribs that grew colder each day. A small voice broke through her shock. "Ma?" James stood in the doorway to the sleeping area, hair tousled from sleep, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Behind him, William appeared, Henry's hand clutched in his. Before Sarah could respond, a soft knock came at the door. Not demanding, not threatening, patient. Sarah looked at her sons, hungry, frightened, fatherless children on the edge of survival. Pride and suspicion had no place in this moment. Only one thing mattered, keeping them alive. With shaking hands, she retrieved the rifle and set it aside, out of reach but visible. Then, drawing a deep breath, she opened the door. Daylight had strengthened, illuminating the faces of the Cherokee couple clearly for the first time. The man stood straight-backed and dignified, perhaps 40 years of age, with lines of experience etched around his eyes. The woman beside him was younger, her expression guarded but not unkind. In her hands she held a bundle wrapped in deerskin. "I am Talasy," the man said, touching his chest. "This is Waleha, my wife." He gestured to the woman, who inclined her head slightly. Waleha stepped forward, offering the bundle to Sarah. When Sarah accepted it with numb hands, the weight and smell told her what it contained even before she unwrapped it. Bread, dried, meat, something that smelled of berries. "Why?" Sarah asked, the single word encompassing all her confusion and suspicion. Talasy's expression remained impassive, but his eyes moved past her to the 3 boys now clustered behind their mothers. "Skirts. Children should not starve," he said simply. "Not yours, not any." Waleha spoke then, her voice softer than her husband's, but no less firm. She addressed her words to Sarah directly, woman to woman. "Our village is 3 hours' walk. Food there. Warm lodges. You come." The offer hung in the air between them, stunning in its directness and generosity. Sarah felt dizzy with conflicting emotions, grief for Thomas, fear of the unknown, desperate hope for her children's survival. "Why would you help us?" she managed, needing to understand before she could decide. Talasy and Waleha exchanged a glance laden with meaning Sarah couldn't decipher. Then Talasy spoke words that would echo in her memory for years to come. "The Creator gives each path many crossings. At each crossing we choose, help or harm, take or give, live in fear or live in peace." He gestured to the desolate winter landscape around them. "This land has seen too much fear, too much harm. We choose differently." Sarah looked back at her sons, their faces thin and pale from weeks of insufficient food, then at the cabin that had been their home and might soon become their tomb. She thought of Thomas, lying unclaimed in some distant ravine, of promises broken not by choice, but by the harsh reality of frontier life. The decision, when it came, was both the hardest and easiest she had ever made. "We need to gather our things," she said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "It won't take long." As the sun climbed higher in the winter sky, Sarah Reed and her 3 sons left the only home they had known in the territory, following 2 Cherokee strangers into the unknown. The boys walked with the resilience of youth, energized by the food they had already consumed and the adventure before them. Sarah carried Henry when his short legs tired, her arms strengthened by determination rather than physical reserves. Talasy led the way, breaking trail through the deep snow, while Waleha walked alongside Sarah, occasionally offering a steadying hand when the terrain grew difficult. They spoke little during the journey, conserving energy in the biting cold, but the silence was companionable rather than strained. 3 hours stretched to 4 as they navigated the wilderness, the children's pace slower than anticipated. When Henry began to cry from exhaustion, Talasy wordlessly lifted the boy onto his broad shoulders, continuing forward as if the child weighed nothing. Sarah watched, a complicated emotion twisting in her chest. Gratitude mingled with the sharp pain of seeing another man care for her son in a way Thomas never would again. As the winter sun began its early descent, they created a ridge, and the Cherokee village appeared below them, nestled in a protected valley. Smoke rose from numerous structures, some traditional winter lodges, others cabins not unlike Sarah's own, evidence of the blending of cultures that characterized many Cherokee communities of the period. Tallahassee paused, allowing them all to catch their breath and prepare for what came next. "My people know you come," he said to Sarah. "They have prepared." "Will they accept us?" Sarah asked, suddenly uncertain. The charity of 2 individuals was one thing. The reception of an entire community might be another matter entirely. Waleha's hand came to rest lightly on Sarah's arm. "They will," she said with quiet confidence. "We have shared your story. They understand." As they descended into the valley and approached the village, Sarah felt the weight of curious eyes upon them. Children peeked from doorways. Women paused in their tasks. Men stood watchful but not threatening. A community assessing newcomers, a scene that would have played out similarly in any frontier settlement, regardless of who inhabited it. An elderly woman emerged from one of the larger structures, her silver hair braided elaborately, her bearing regal, despite her advanced years. She approached Tallahassee and spoke rapidly in Cherokee, her gaze moving frequently to Sarah and the boys. Tallahassee responded respectfully, gesturing occasionally toward the Reed family. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, she recognized a rhythm of storytelling, of explanation. When he finished, the elderly woman approached Sarah directly. "I am Ayasta," she said in heavily accented but understandable English. "Mother of Tallahassee, grandmother to many." She studied Sarah's face with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Your husband is lost. Now you are here. Your children will live." The simple declaration, "Your children will live," struck Sarah with unexpected force. It was the distillation of everything that mattered, the core truth that had driven her decision to trust these strangers. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, the words utterly inadequate, yet all she had to offer. Ayasta nodded once, accepting the thanks as her due, then turned her attention to the boys. James stood straight under her scrutiny, unconsciously mimicking his father's posture when meeting new people. William half hid behind his brother, uncharacteristically shy. Henry, still perched on Tallahassee's shoulders, observed everything with wide-eyed wonder. "Good boys," Ayasta pronounced after her inspection. "Strong bones, they learn quick, yes?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, a hint of maternal pride breaking through her exhaustion. "They do." "Good. They need to learn many things now, different things." Ayasta gestured toward a nearby cabin, smaller than the others but well-maintained. "You, stay there. Food inside. Rest now. Tomorrow we will talk more." As they were led toward the cabin, Sarah felt the first tendrils of hope taking root alongside her grief. Thomas was gone, a loss that would never fully heal. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges she could scarcely imagine. But in this moment, in this place, her children would survive the winter, and for now, that was enough. The cabin assigned to the Reed family was modest but sturdy, built in a style that blended Cherokee and European construction techniques. A fire already burned in the stone hearth, casting warm light across the single room. Furs lined the wooden platform beds, and pottery containers held stews, cornbread, and dried berries. The boys fell upon the food with ravenous enthusiasm, while Sarah sank onto a low stool, the magnitude of the day's events finally overwhelming her. Waleha remained with them as twilight deepened into night, her quiet presence a comfort as Sarah worked through her grief and uncertainty. She said little, allowing Sarah the dignity of her emotions, but her capable hands kept the fire fed and helped settle the exhausted children into bed. "You are safe now," Waleha said simply as she prepared to leave. "Rest. Heal." Sarah nodded, unable to find words adequate to express her gratitude. As the door closed behind Waleha, Sarah sat beside her sleeping children, watching their peaceful faces in the firelight. For the first time since Thomas failed to return, she allowed herself to weep for her husband, for the life they had built, for the uncertain future that lay ahead. Dawn arrived with a gentle knock at the door. Sarah, who had slept fitfully on the edge of James's bed, rose quickly to answer, not wanting the noise to wake her still slumbering sons. Ayasta stood outside, a basket in her weathered hands. "You eat," the elder woman said, pushing the basket into Sarah's hands. "Then come." Much to speak of. Before Sarah could respond, Ayasta turned and walked away, clearly expecting compliance. Sarah examined the basket's contents: more cornbread, boiled eggs, strips of venison, and a container of tea still steaming in the cold morning air. The sight and smell reminded her how little she had eaten the previous day, despite the provisions provided. She woke the boys gently, and they broke their fast together, the food bringing color back to their cheeks and energy to their movements. When the meal was finished, Sarah faced her first challenge: what to do with her children while she met with Ayasta. The decision was made for her when the door opened without preamble, and a Cherokee woman, perhaps a few years younger than Sarah, entered, followed by two children close in age to James and William. "I am Unol," she announced without ceremony. "These are my sons, Sequoia and Waya. They show your boys our village. You go speak with Grandmother Ayasta." Her tone allowed no argument. Sarah hesitated, maternal instinct warring with the knowledge that she was in no position to refuse the customs of those who had saved her family. James, sensing her conflict, stepped forward. "We'll be good, Ma," he promised, his small face serious, "and I'll watch over Will and Henry." Unol's stern expression softened slightly. "Good boy," she said with approval. "Come, village waiting." With reluctance, Sarah watched her children depart with the unfamiliar woman and her sons. Only after extracting a promise from Unol to return them to the cabin by midday did she finally make her way toward the larger structure where she had first encountered Ayasta. The elder woman sat at the center of the lodge, surrounded by several other Cherokee of varying ages. Tallahassee was among them, his expression grave as Sarah entered. A space had been left open in the circle, clearly intended for her. "Sit," Ayasta instructed, gesturing to the empty spot. "We now talk about important things." Sarah lowered herself to the woven mat, acutely aware of the eyes upon her. Though no hostility emanated from the gathered Cherokee, their scrutiny was intense. "You wonder why we help you," Ayasta began without a preamble. "Why do we bring white women and white children to our village when white men take Cherokee land? When soldiers come to force Cherokee west on a trail where many die?" Sarah's education had not prepared her for the brutal directness of the question, nor for the painful truth it contained. She had heard whispers of tensions between the government and native tribes, of treaties broken and rights disregarded. But such political matters had seemed distant from her life with Thomas. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, finding honesty her only recourse, "except that I am grateful. Without your help, my children would have died." Ayasta nodded, as if Sarah had confirmed something important. "Yes, children would die. This is the truth, and the truth is why you are here." She gestured to Tallahassee. "Tell her." Tallahassee leaned forward, his expression solemn. 3 winters passed. My brother Adahi traveled to trade with white settlements. Heavy snow came. He found white family, mother, father, young daughter, stranded when the wagon broke. "The child is sick with fever." He paused, his eyes holding Sarah's. Adahi helped them, brought medicines, fixed wagon, led them to a safe place. Sarah listened, puzzled by the relevance of the story, until Tallahassee continued. Last summer, soldiers came to a neighboring village, said all Cherokee must leave lands, go west. Adahi's wife's family lived there. When soldiers started burning lodges, Adahi tried to stop them. White officer remembered him, said, "This Cherokee helped my sister's family when no white man would. He stays if he wishes." Talasi's voice carried no triumph, only a quiet certainty. One kindness created another. "You helped me to create a debt?" Sarah asked, trying to understand. An older man across the circle shook his head, speaking in Cherokee. Talasi translated, "Raccoon says not debt, connection, web that holds people together when winds of hatred blow strong. We know not all white people wish us gone," Ayasta added. "Some speak against removal, write in papers, even stand with Cherokee in courts. But not enough. Each season more soldiers come. More Cherokee forced west. Some hide in mountains, some fights, some go quietly to save their children from bullets." The stark reality of their situation struck Sarah with newfound clarity. These people who had saved her family were themselves facing extinction. Their way of life, their homes, their very presence in lands they had inhabited for generations, threatened by her own people. "What will happen to you?" she asked quietly. "We do not know," Talasi answered honestly. "We hide well in these mountains, have friends among white settlers who warn us when soldiers come, but the path grows harder each season." Ayasta's gaze was penetrating as she asked, "What would you have done if the Cherokee family came to your cabin in snow, hungry, children cold?" The question pierced Sarah like a blade. She wanted to claim she would have shown the same generosity that had been extended to her family, but the truth was less certain. Fear might have prevailed. Suspicion, the prejudices she had absorbed throughout her life without questioning. "I don't know," she admitted, the words painful to voice. "I would have been afraid." "Yes," Ayasta nodded. "Fear is like poison in blood. Makes people see enemies where there are only other mothers, other fathers, other children trying to live." The elderly woman leaned forward. "But you are here now. You will learn. Your boys will learn. And perhaps one day you will tell this story to other white people, and they will learn too." The purpose behind their charity suddenly became clear. To Sarah, this wasn't simply an act of compassion, though that motivation was genuine. It was also an investment in understanding, a bridge built between two worlds, increasingly divided by fear and violence. "What do you want from me?" Sarah asked directly. "First, to live," Talasi replied. "To keep your children alive through winter. This is most important." His expression softened slightly. "Then, to learn our ways while we learn yours. To become part of a circle, not outside it." An older woman who had remained silent spoke up, her English halting but determined. "I teach you plants for medicine. You teach us to read marks on paper. Fair trade, yes?" Before Sarah could respond, a commotion outside interrupted the council. The door flew open, and Unol rushed in, her face tight with alarm. "Traders on North Trail," she reported in rapid Cherokee. The atmosphere in the lodge transformed instantly. Men rose to their feet, conversations erupted in urgent tones. Talasi turned to Sarah, his expression grave. "The traders come sometimes. Most respect our boundaries, trade fair. But some bring whiskey, which causes trouble. Some are scouts for militia." He studied her face intently. "If these men see white women, white children here, they ask questions. Maybe report it to authorities." The implicit question hung in the air. Could Sarah be trusted not to reveal herself, not to seek rescue from her own kind at the expense of those who had saved her? "Where are my sons?" she asked, fear sharpening her voice. "Safe," Unol assured her, "with my mother in the inner lodge. No traders go there." Sarah looked around the circle of faces, reading the varying degrees of concern, suspicion, and hope directed toward her. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life and her children's futures. "Tell me what to do," she said firmly. "How I can help protect this village that has protected us." Relief visibly swept through several members of the council. Ayasta nodded, approval glinting in her dark eyes. "You and boys stay hidden until traders are gone," Talasy instructed. "No white faces seen, no English words heard." "I understand," Sarah agreed readily. The idea of encountering other white men, men who might indeed rescue her from the Cherokee, filled her with unexpected dread rather than hope. Such a rescue would mean abandoning those who had shown her family nothing but kindness, potentially exposing them to danger in the process. "Come," Unol beckoned. "I will take you to the children." Sarah followed swiftly, her mind racing with the implications of her choice. By hiding from her own people, was she betraying some unspoken loyalty? Or was she simply acknowledging the more fundamental loyalty to those who had saved her children's lives? Unol led her to a small, windowless structure at the center of the village. Inside, Sarah found her sons playing contentedly with several Cherokee children under the watchful eye of an elderly woman. James was attempting to learn a string game. From a girl slightly older than himself, his brow furrowed in concentration. William and Henry sat among a circle of younger children, passing smooth stones back and forth in some sort of game Sarah didn't recognize. None of the boys seemed distressed by their mother's absence or their unfamiliar surroundings. On the contrary, they appeared more animated than Sarah had seen them in weeks, the shadow of hunger and fear temporarily lifted from their young shoulders. "They adapt quickly," Unol observed, a hint of approval in her voice. "Children always do, easier than adults." Sarah nodded, watching as James successfully completed the string pattern, earning a bright smile from his teacher. "What will happen now?" she asked quietly. "We wait," Unol replied simply. "Traders usually do not stay long. Take furs, leave goods, go before dark." The wait extended throughout the day, the children growing restless in the confined space despite the games and stories provided by the Cherokee women who took turns sitting with them. By late afternoon, Henry was fretful, missing his nap, and confused by the prolonged confinement. "Want to go outside, Ma?" he whimpered, clinging to Sarah's skirts. "Soon, love," she soothed, though uncertainty gnawed at her. How long would they need to remain hidden? What if the traders decided to stay? Overnight, as dusk approached, the door finally opened to reveal Talasy, his expression unreadable. "Traders gone," he announced. "Safe now." The children tumbled out of the lodge like freed birds, stretching and running in the open air. Sarah followed, more slowly, noting the tension still visible in the set of Talasy's shoulders. "Did all go well?" she asked cautiously. "Traders were not just traders," he replied, his voice low. "Two were scouts for militia, asked many questions about other Cherokee villages, about those who resist removal." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. Did they suspect anything? "No, we traded as always. Give no reason for suspicion." He hesitated, "but they said soldiers coming this way next month, looking for hidden Cherokee villages in the mountains." The news settled over Sarah like a physical weight. These people, who had saved her family, now faced a threat she could neither prevent nor protect them from. "What will you do?" Talasy's gaze swept across the village, taking in the lodges, the people going about their evening tasks, the children playing in the last light of day. "Council will decide. Some say fight, some say hide deeper in mountains, some say accept fate, go west on Trail of Tears." The name sent a shiver through Sarah, Trail of Tears, so vivid in its simple tragedy. "And you? What do you say?" she asked, suddenly needing to know this man's thoughts, this man who had walked into her life and irrevocably changed its course. "I say we survive," Talasy answered after a long pause, "as Cherokee have always survived, by bending like river reed, in a storm not breaking like tall pine." He looked directly at Sarah then. "And now that survival includes you and your sons." The statement carried both responsibility and acceptance. Sarah was no longer simply a recipient of charity, a temporary guest until the winter passed. She and her children had become part of the village's future, for better or worse. That evening, as Sarah tucked her exhausted sons into their beds, James asked the question she had been dreading since their arrival. "Ma, are we going home soon?" Sarah smoothed his dark hair back from his forehead, choosing her words carefully. "Our cabin isn't safe for us anymore, James, not without your father to hunt and chop wood. So we're staying here, with the Cherokee." His young face was serious, processing this significant shift in his understanding of their situation. "For now," Sarah replied, unwilling to make promises about a future so uncertain. "They've been very kind to us, haven't they?" James nodded thoughtfully. "Sequoia is teaching me to make snares for rabbits, and Mr. Tallassee said I'm old enough to learn bow hunting in spring." The casual acceptance in her son's voice struck Sarah deeply. To James, their benefactors were not frightening others or simplified caricatures from frontier tales. They were simply people with names and skills and kindnesses to offer. "Would you like to stay?" she asked, curious about his perspective. James considered the question with a seriousness beyond his years. "I miss Pa," he said finally, "and I miss our cabin, but I don't miss being hungry and scared." He looked up at his mother, his eyes reflecting wisdom acquired too young. "And you're not crying every night anymore." Sarah drew in a sharp breath, unaware that her nightly tears had been noticed by her eldest. She gathered him close, this child forced to shoulder adult understanding far too soon. "We're going to be all right, James," she whispered into his hair. "Different than we planned, but all right all the same." As her son drifted into sleep, Sarah remained by his side, contemplating the path that lay before them. The Cherokee village offered safety, community, and survival through the winter, but the approaching militia threatened all of that. Whatever came next, she knew with sudden clarity that her family's fate was now inextricably bound with the fate of these people who had extended their circle to include 4 strangers. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent, erasing the traders' tracks from the village. Sarah listened to its whisper against the cabin walls, no longer hearing a threat, but rather nature's own veil of protection, hiding them all from the world beyond the mountains, at least for now. The days following the traders' visit brought a flurry of activity to the village. Council meetings extended late into the night, voices sometimes rising in heated debate that carried across the silent winter landscape. Though Sarah was not privy to these discussions, she could sense the tension that permeated the community, manifesting in hurried conversations that ceased when she approached, and in the increased hunting parties that departed at dawn and returned. Laden with game to be smoked and preserved, they were preparing for something, whether flight, a fight, or some alternative she couldn't yet grasp. A week after the trader's departure, Tallassee sought Sarah out as she helped Waleha and other women process deer hides, a skill she was slowly acquiring despite her city-bred hands. "Council has decided," he announced without preamble. "Most villages will move deeper into mountains when the moon is full, 5 days from now." Sarah's hands stilled on the hide stretched before her. "Move? All of you?" "Not all," Tallassee acknowledged. "Some elders say they are too old for a journey. We'll stay, face whatever comes. Some warriors will stay to protect them, to watch soldiers, to send warnings if needed." His eyes met hers directly. "You and your sons must decide. Come with the village to a new place, or return to white settlements." The choice struck Sarah with unexpected force. She had been so focused on immediate survival that the future beyond winter had remained a hazy concept. Now it crystallized before her with stark clarity: continue deeper into the Cherokee world, or attempt to rebuild a life among her own people? What would returning mean? She asked, needing to understand all options. Our cabin is too remote to manage alone. Trading post to the south has a settlement growing nearby, Tallassee informed her. Mostly white families, some good people there who would help widows with children. He hesitated. We would take you there safely if you choose this path. The offer was generous, logical even, yet the thought of leaving the community that had saved them filled Sarah with inexplicable dread. She thought of James learning to set snares, of William playing stick games with Cherokee boys his age, of Henry babbling his first Cherokee words alongside English, and of herself finally sleeping through the night without fear. I need time, she replied finally, to think, to talk with my sons. Tallassee nodded, respecting her need for deliberation. 5 days, he reminded her, then we must know. That evening, Sarah sat with James beside the fire after his younger brothers had fallen asleep. At 6, he was old enough to understand at least some of the gravity of their situation, and Sarah had always believed in honesty with her children, even when difficult. The Cherokee village is moving deeper into the mountains, she explained, keeping her voice gentle but straightforward. They've invited us to go with them. James poked at the fire with a stick, his young face serious in the flickering light. Because of the soldiers? Sarah shouldn't have been surprised by his perception, yet she was. Yes, the soldiers might come to force them to leave their homes, like they made us leave our cabin. Not exactly, Sarah chose her words carefully. We left because we couldn't survive there alone. The Cherokee are being told to leave, even though they could survive. You're just fine. James was quiet for a long moment, digesting this injustice with a child's clear sense of fairness. Why do the soldiers want them to go away? Sarah wished Thomas were here to help navigate this conversation. He had always been better at explaining the complexities of the world to their curious eldest. But Thomas was gone, and James deserved better than evasions. Some white people want the land the Cherokee live on, she said simply. They believe they should have it instead. But it's the Cherokee's land, James protested. They were here first. Pa told me that. Sarah smiled sadly at her son's innocent conviction. Yes, they were here first, but not everyone thinks that matters. James frowned, struggling with concepts too large for his young mind, yet unwilling to abandon the puzzle. If we go with them, does that mean we're not white anymore? The question caught Sarah off guard. No, love. We'll still be who we are, but we'd be choosing to live differently than we planned. Would Pa be mad if we stayed with the Cherokee? Sarah's throat tightened. What would Thomas think of their current situation? He had never expressed particular prejudice against native peoples, but neither had he suggested anything but the standard frontier life for their family. Yet his paramount concern had always been his family's survival and happiness. I think, she said carefully, that your father would want us to be safe and cared for, and the Cherokee have given us that. James nodded, seemingly satisfied. I want to stay with them, Ma. Will and Henry do too, even if they don't understand everything. You've discussed this with your brothers? Sarah asked, surprised. James shrugged. Will likes it here. There are more children to play with than at our cabin, and Henry follows Will everywhere anyway. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Her children had adapted to their new circumstances with the flexibility of youth, finding joy and connection, where she had seen only strangeness and uncertainty. We'll talk more tomorrow, she promised, kissing his forehead. For now, sleep. As James settled into his bed, Sarah stepped outside the cabin, needing the crisp night air to clear her thoughts. The village was mostly dark, save for the larger council lodge, where light still glowed through animal skin windows. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant against the black winter sky, unchanged despite the upheaval below. Cannot sleep? Sarah turned to find Waleha approaching, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the cold. "Too much to think about," Sarah admitted. Waleha nodded in understanding. "Big decision. Hard decision." "What would you do if you were me?" Sarah asked impulsively, craving guidance from this woman whose quiet strength had become a comfort. Waleha considered the question seriously. "I cannot know. Have never been white woman alone with children." She paused. "But I know what it is to leave home, to start again. My first village was burned by white militia when I was young. Many died. Those who lived started a new village here." Sarah hadn't known this piece of Waleha's history, and it shifted her perspective yet again. "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. Waleha shrugged. "Old wounds, but they teach us. My mother said, 'Home is not a place. Home is people who keep your spirit safe.'" She looked at Sarah directly. "Where are people who keep your spirit safe?" The question lingered in Sarah's mind long after Waleha had returned to her own lodge. Where indeed? The frontier settlement, near the trading post, would offer the familiarity of her own culture, perhaps eventual remarriage and security. But would there be hands reaching out to help when needed, voices raised in defense of her family, a community that valued her children's lives as their own? The answer came to her gradually, not in a sudden revelation, but in the accumulated weight of small moments. Ayasta, teaching Henry Cherokee words with patient repetition, Unol's sons including William in their games without question. Talassie, taking time to show James how to notch an arrow properly. And for herself, the women who made space in their circle, who corrected her efforts without mockery, who shared food and knowledge and stories. By dawn, her decision was made. She found Talassie as he prepared to depart with a hunting party, the sky still grey with early morning light. "We will come with you," she said simply, "my sons and I, to the new village." Something like approval flickered in Talassie's normally stoic expression. "Good," he replied. "Prepare what you will carry. Leave what can be replaced. We travel light, move fast." The following days passed in a blur of activity. The entire village mobilized with practiced efficiency, sorting possessions into what must be taken and what could be left behind or cached for potential retrieval later. Sarah marveled at the Cherokee's systematic approach. Nothing was overlooked, from food stores to medicinal herbs, from hunting tools to the education of the young. Ayasta oversaw it all. Her advanced age, no barrier to her authority. When Sarah brought her small bundle of possessions for inspection, the elder woman sorted through them with brisk practicality. "Good," she nodded at Sarah's practical choices. Clothes for the children, Thomas's hunting knife, a small family Bible, a packet of seeds Sarah had brought west for their garden. "You learned to think Cherokee way already. Take what gives life, leave what is only weight." The night before their departure, a ceremony was held in the council lodge. Every member of the village attended, from the eldest to the youngest infant. Sarah and her sons were specifically invited, seated in a place of honor near Ayasta and the other elders. The ceremony began with prayers in Cherokee, the melodic language rising and falling in patterns Sarah was beginning to recognize, if not understand. Drums accompanied certain passages, their steady heartbeat rhythm connecting all present in a shared pulse. When the prayers concluded, Ayasta rose and addressed the gathering, first in Cherokee, then switching to English for Sarah's benefit. "Tomorrow we leave this place that has been our home. We take with us not things, but what matters, our stories, our ways, our connections to each other." Her gaze swept the assembled faces. "Some stay behind, brave ones who watch for us, who keep sacred places, who may follow later if the Creator wills it." She beckoned to another elder, a man Sarah knew as Raccoon, who limped forward on legs damaged by some long-ago injury. Raccoon stays, too difficult for him to travel far. Or vast, 5 warriors stay with him, 3 women who choose to care for those who remain. Sarah felt a pang of sorrow for this inevitable separation of the community. Raccoon had been kind to her sons, crafting tiny wooden animals for them and telling stories that James attempted to translate for his brothers. We also take a new family. With us, Ayasta continued, gesturing toward Sarah and her sons. White in skin, but becoming Cherokee in heart. Their path joins ours now. A murmur of approval rippled through the gathering. Sarah felt James sit straighter beside her, pride evident in his posture. Even William, usually fidgeting by this point in any formal occasion, remained still, sensing the importance of the moment. To mark this joining, Ayasta announced, "We give new names, names that speak to spirit, not just ears." Sarah hadn't anticipated this development and felt a momentary uncertainty. Names were powerful things, markers of identity and connection. Would taking Cherokee names somehow diminish who they were, who Thomas had known them to be, as if sensing her concern? Talasy spoke quietly from nearby. "Not to replace, but to add. 2 names for 2 worlds you now walk between." Ayasta beckoned James forward first. The boy approached without hesitation, standing tall before the elder woman. "This one watches, thinks, then acts," Ayasta observed, like a hawk circling before it strikes, balanced between child and man already. She placed her hands on James's shoulders. "In Cherokee way, you are Tsiu." "Hawk." James repeated the name. Carefully, the unfamiliar sounds awkward on his tongue, but his expression solemn with the responsibility of this new identity. William came next, practically bouncing with excitement now that he understood what was happening. "This one," Ayasta chuckled, "is like a young fox. Clever, quick, always moving." She tousled William's perpetually messy hair. "You are Wire, wolf cub with much to learn but strong spirit." William grinned, immediately loving his new name and repeating it with gusto. "Wire, I'm Wire, little Henry." Required coaxing to approach Ayasta alone, but once before her, he stood with thumb in mouth, wide eyes, taking in the elder's weathered face without fear. "Smallest one has a gentle heart," Ayasta observed. "Trusts easily, loves deeply, like fawns. In spring meadows," she touched his cheek gently. "You are Awi, dear, small now but will grow strong." Henry seemed more interested in returning to his mother than in his new name, but he managed a shy smile for Ayasta before scampering back to Sarah's side. Finally, it was Sarah's turn. She approached Ayasta with a mixture of emotions: gratitude, uncertainty, a strange sense of crossing a threshold from which there would be no easy return. Ayasta studied her face for a long moment before speaking. "You have traveled far, not just in steps, but in heart. Left behind old understandings to embrace new ones. Brave like a river that changes course when a mountain falls across it, finding a new path without losing self." The elder woman placed wrinkled hands on either side of Sarah's face. "You are Enola, Black Fox. Clever, adaptable, protective of young." "Enola," Sarah repeated, the name feeling strange, yet somehow fitting on her tongue. "Now you are known to us in our way," Ayasta declared, "and we to you." The remainder of the ceremony involved sharing food, portions deliberately small to symbolize the journey ahead where resources would be carefully managed, and stories. Various members of the tribe rose to recount tales of previous journeys, of ancestors who had faced similar challenges, of the sacred places they would eventually find again. Through it all, Sarah was struck by the resilience embedded in every aspect of Cherokee culture. This was not the first time they had been forced to abandon homes and start anew. Their stories, songs, and ceremonies contained the institutional memory of a people well practiced in survival against tremendous odds. As the gathering concluded, Talasy approached Sarah. "First light tomorrow," he reminded her. "Be ready." "We will be," she assured him. "Good. My family will travel near yours, help with children when the path is difficult." The offer of assistance touched Sarah deeply. "Thank you for everything." Talasy nodded, acknowledging her gratitude without need for elaboration. As he turned to leave, Sarah impulsively reached out to touch his arm. "The soldiers," she said quietly. "What will happen to those who stay behind if they come?" Talasy's expression remained impassive, but Sarah could read the concern in his eyes. "Raccoons are respected elders, known to some white traders. He will say others already went west, show papers that say this land now belongs to him through treaty." He paused. "It might work, it might not, and if it doesn't, then they will follow us or join ancestors." The stark simplicity of his answer underscored the gravity of what was at stake. Path is well hidden, maps wrong on purpose. Cherokee have lived in these mountains since the world began. We know ways soldiers do not. As Sarah led her sleepy children back to their cabin for one final night, the weight of their decision pressed upon her. They were casting their lot with people being systematically displaced, choosing a path of uncertainty and potential danger. Yet the alternative, returning to white society, where she would forever be the widow Reed, struggling to support 3 children alone, seemed equally perilous in different ways. That night, as her sons slept deeply around her, Sarah removed her wedding ring, the simple gold band Thomas had placed on her finger with such hope for their future together. She had kept it on even after learning of his death, a talisman of the life they had built. Now, with gentle reverence, she tucked it into the small pocket Bible she would carry with them, marking the page where their marriage date was recorded. Along with the births of their sons, not forgotten, she promised Thomas's memory, just transformed, as we must be to survive. Dawn arrived clear and cold, the eastern sky blooming with streaks of pink and gold as the village came to life. Families emerged from lodges, carrying carefully packed bundles, children wrapped warmly against the winter air. There was little conversation. Everyone knew their role in this well-rehearsed departure. Sarah stood with her sons at the cabin door, their few possessions distributed among them according to size and strength. James carried a small pack containing extra clothing and the precious seeds. William proudly bore a waterskin and pouch of dried meat. Even Henry had a tiny bundle, a deerskin wrap containing the wooden animals Raccoon had carved for him. "Ready?" Sarah asked her children, looking into each face for confirmation. James nodded solemnly, the weight of understanding heavy in his young eyes. William bounced on his toes, treating the journey as yet another adventure. Henry simply slipped his small hand into Sarah's, a gesture of absolute trust that nearly undid her composure. As the village began to move out in an organized procession, Sarah cast one last glance at the cabin that had sheltered them through the worst days of her life. Like their original homestead, it represented a chapter now closing, a temporary haven, in a journey that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Ahead, Talasy and Waleha waited patiently, their own children falling into step with James and William, as naturally as if they had always traveled together. Beyond them stretched the mountain path, climbing into forests that promised both challenge and sanctuary. Sarah hoisted Henry onto her hip, adjusted her pack, and stepped forward into their new life, not as refugees or charity cases, but as Enola and her sons, following a path chosen with clear eyes and determined hearts. The Cherokee exodus moved like a living organism through the winter landscape, expanding and contracting as terrain demanded, scouts ranging ahead and behind, the strongest positioned to assist those who struggled. Children were passed from one set of arms to another when fatigue set in, burdens redistributed according to need rather than ownership. Sarah marveled at the efficiency of their progress. Despite the presence of elders and young children, they maintained a steady pace that ate up miles with surprising speed. By midday of the first day's journey, the familiar valley had disappeared behind them, replaced by dense forest and increasingly rugged terrain. Talassie led them along paths invisible to Sarah's untrained eye, game trails widened by generations of Cherokee feet, routes that meandered seemingly without purpose until she realized they consistently found the easiest passage through difficult landscapes. They followed ridgelines where possible, descending into valleys only when necessary, always maintaining awareness of where water could be found. When Henry's short legs tired, Talassie's 12-year-old son, Adohi, hoisted the toddler onto his shoulders without hesitation. William kept pace with Waleha's daughter, Galilahi. The two children engaged in a whispered game of spotting animal tracks that required no common language. James walked near the front with Talassie, absorbing the man's quiet instructions about navigation and survival with solemn attention. That first night, they made camp in a sheltered hollow between two ridges. The site wasn't chosen by accident. Sarah noted the proximity to a small spring, the natural windbreak provided by stone outcroppings, and the abundance of dry wood for fires. The entire community moved with practiced precision, establishing the camp, preparing meals, and creating sleeping arrangements with minimal direction needed. "You have done this before," Sarah observed to Waleha as they worked together to construct a simple shelter from pine boughs. "Many times," Waleha confirmed. "Cherokee have always moved with the seasons, hunting camps, gathering places, trading journeys." Her hands never stopped working as she spoke. "Even before white soldiers came, we knew how to travel well." "How far will we go?" Sarah asked, securing a branch as instructed. 3, maybe 4 days more," Waleha replied. "Place already chosen, hidden valley high in mountains, good water, good hunting, hard for soldiers to find." That night, exhausted from the day's travel, Sarah and her sons slept soundly in their makeshift shelter, huddled close for warmth beneath shared blankets. The cold was intense at this higher elevation, but the Cherokee fires burned steady throughout the night, tended by sentries who also kept watch for any sign of pursuit. Dawn arrived with a light snowfall that dusted the camp in crystalline white. Sarah woke to find James already up, helping Adohi break ice from water containers. William still slept curled against her side, while Henry had somehow migrated during the night to a nest of blankets between two elderly Cherokee women who cooed over him in their native language when he finally stirred. This set the pattern for the days that followed, rising with first light, traveling until dusk, establishing camp with practiced efficiency. Sarah integrated herself into the community's rhythms, learning new skills by necessity and observation. She discovered muscles she didn't know she possessed as they climbed ever higher into the mountains, following routes that zigzagged up steep slopes and traversed narrow ledges. On the third day, snow began falling in earnest, fat flakes that quickly accumulated on the already white landscape. The pace slowed as visibility decreases, but never halted entirely. Talassie and the other leaders maintained their steady progress, navigating by landmarks Sarah couldn't discern through the swirling white. "How do they know where we're going?" she asked Waleha as they paused briefly to rest and share water. "Stories," Waleha replied simply. "Every rock, every stream has a name, has a story. Stories tell us where to go, how to return." She gestured to the elders who, despite their age, maintained remarkable stamina. They carry maps in their minds, pass them to children through stories, better than paper maps that burn or fade. By late afternoon, the snowfall intensified, reducing visibility to mere yards. The wind picked up, driving icy particles against exposed skin. Sarah pulled Henry closer into her cloak, shielding him from the worst of the elements. Ahead she could barely make out Talassy's form as he conferred with several other men, their expressions grave. "Storm comes," Waleha explained unnecessarily. "Bad timing." Talassy approached them, snow crusting his fur cap and shoulders. "Must make camp now," he announced. "Not where planned, but cannot go further in this." The decision rippled through. The group and the orderly procession shifted into emergency camp-making mode. With practiced speed, the strongest men began clearing snow and establishing basic windbreaks, while others gathered what firewood could be found. "Stay here," Waleha instructed Sarah firmly, taking Henry from her arms. "Keep William close. We make shelter quickly." Sarah obeyed, gathering William to her side while searching for James in the swirling white. Panic flickered through her when she couldn't locate him immediately, until Talassy's voice cut through her fear. "Your Tsiu helps with fire," he informed her, using James's Cherokee name with a hint of pride. "Good hands, strong for his age." Within an hour, a camp materialized from the wilderness. Crude but effective shelters arranged in a protective circle around central fires that somehow stayed lit despite the driving snow. Food was distributed sparingly, water melted from snow. The mood remained calm but vigilant, no one voicing the concern that hung in the air. Being trapped on an exposed mountainside in a winter storm could prove fatal even for those accustomed to such hardships. Sarah found herself sharing a hastily constructed shelter with Waleha's family and her own sons. The space was cramped but warm from shared body heat, the children arranged in the center, where they quickly fell into exhausted sleep. "Will the storm delay us long?" Sarah asked quietly, as they settled in for the night. Talassy exchanged a glance with Waleha before answering. "If snow stops by morning, one day will be delayed. If it continues—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Each day delayed increased the risk of supply shortages and exposure. Through the night, Sarah woke periodically to the sound of men rotating watch duties, their murmured Cherokee conversations punctuated by the howl of wind. Each time, she checked her sons by touch, reassuring herself of their continued warmth and steady breathing before drifting back into uneasy sleep. Dawn came late and dim through persistent snowfall, though the ferocity of the storm had diminished overnight. Sarah emerged from their shelter to find the camp already stirring. Leaders gathered in discussion, while others prepared a meager breakfast from dwindling rations. Ayasta beckoned Sarah to join the council's conversation, an honor that still surprised her despite her increasing integration into the community. "We must decide," the elder woman stated without preamble. "Continue today through snow or wait for better weather." "What are the arguments?" Sarah asked, understanding by now that her opinion was genuinely sought, not merely a courtesy. An older man she knew as Two Bears spoke through Talassy's translation. "Storm weakens, but will not end today. Snow deep already, makes travel dangerous on narrow paths. Better to wait one day, let it settle, preserve strength." A younger warrior named Degotoga disagreed. "Each day here uses food we cannot replace. Better to push through now, reach the valley where hunting is possible." The debate continued with measured voices, each perspective given its due. Sarah listened carefully, noting how decisions were reached among the Cherokee, not by simple majority or deference to the loudest voice, but through a process that weighed wisdom, experience, and practical considerations. When Ayasta asked her opinion, Sarah spoke thoughtfully. "The children are strong but tired. Another day's rest would restore them. But—" she hesitated, then continued honestly, "I worry about those who stayed behind. The longer we delay, the more likely soldiers will come before we send warning or guidance to your people." Her concern for those who remained at the original village shifted the discussion. Sarah had not realized the impact her words might have, but she saw the council members exchange meaningful glances. "She thinks like Cherokee now?" Ayasta observed with approval. "Consider all the circles, not just those present." The decision was reached shortly after. They would remain camped for the day, using the time to rest, repair equipment, and send two swift young men back along their trail to establish a line of communication with those left behind. Travel would resume at first light the following morning, regardless of weather conditions. The day of enforced rest proved valuable beyond measure. Children who had grown fractious from continuous travel regained their spirits, engaging in games that required minimal language. The women used the opportunity to redistribute supplies, ensuring nothing was wasted or unnecessarily duplicated. Men reinforced makeshift snowshoes that would be essential for the journey ahead. Sarah found herself assisting with inventory of the remaining food supplies, a task that required both accuracy and diplomacy. Working alongside Cherokee women who had initially regarded her with polite distance, she now exchanged smiles and even jokes through the limited vocabulary they shared. "You count well," one woman named Unega commented, impressed by Sarah's systematic approach. "Good for Cherokee women to know how much remains, how much needed." The casual inclusion, "good for Cherokee woman," struck Sarah profoundly. She was no longer perceived as an outsider granted temporary charity, but as a member of the community with responsibilities and contributions to make. That evening, as the storm finally began to abate, leaving a crystalline clarity to the frigid air, Tallassee sought Sarah out where she sat mending a tear in William's coat. "Tomorrow is a difficult journey," he informed her without a preamble. "Steepest climb ahead, then descend into the valley. Children must be prepared." Sarah nodded, appreciating his directness. "What can I do to help them prepare themselves?" "Tell them the truth," Tallassee replied simply. "Hard day coming. Must be brave, must listen exactly to instructions. No wandering, no complaints." His expression softened slightly as he added, "But also tell them that tomorrow night we reach a new home, place of safety." Sarah gathered her sons before sleep that night, explaining what lay ahead in terms each could understand. James absorbed the information with the seriousness that increasingly defined his character. William's eyes gleamed with the prospect of adventure, though Sarah made sure he understood the gravity of following directions precisely. Even little Henry seemed to grasp that something significant awaited them. "Will we have a real house again?" William asked, the first indication he had given that their nomadic existence weighed on him. "Not immediately," Sarah answered honestly. "First, there will be shelters like those at the previous village. But over time, yes, we'll have a proper home again." "With Pa?" Henry asked innocently, the question piercing Sarah's heart. James answered before she could find words. "Pa is with the angels now, Henry, remember? But we have new friends to help us, like Tallassee and Waleha." The simple explanation, delivered with a big brother's authority, satisfied Henry in a way Sarah's more careful responses might not have. She pulled all three boys close, marveling at their resilience in the face of such profound change. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "all of you, more than I can say." Morning arrived with brutal cold but clear skies. The camp dismantled with practiced efficiency, and by the time the winter sun had fully risen, they were already ascending the steepest section of their route. The path narrowed to single file in places, skirting precipitous drops that made Sarah's heart race when William ventured too close to the edge. Tallassee had arranged the procession strategically, placing experienced adults between children, positioning the strongest at points where assistance might be needed to navigate particularly challenging passages. Sarah carried Henry, strapped, to her back for most of the ascent, his weight a burden she welcomed as reassurance of his safety. James stayed close to Tallassee, while William found himself firmly in Walaha's grip whenever his natural curiosity threatened to lure him from the path. By midday, they had reached what appeared to be the summit of their climb, a narrow ridge, offering breathtaking views of the mountain range stretching in all directions. The entire party paused briefly, allowing the slowest members to catch up and everyone to rest before beginning the descent. Ayasta called Sarah to her side as they shared a sparse meal of dried meat and corn cakes. The elder woman gestured to the expansive vista before them. "Cherokee have lived in these mountains since time began," she said, her weathered face turned to the horizon. "White men's papers and maps say they own land now, but mountains remain. They remember who walked them first, who knew their secrets." She looked directly at Sarah. "Now you and your sons know these secrets too. They become part of your story." The profound responsibility inherent in that statement wasn't lost on Sarah. They weren't merely fleeing with the Cherokee. They were being entrusted with knowledge, with pathways, with survival methods that had sustained a people for generations. "I will honor what I've been shown," she promised. Ayasta nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because the path ahead is not only through mountains, but through time that brings many changes. Cherokee ways must continue even as the world around us changes." The descent into the valley proved as challenging as the ascent, though in different ways. Gravity pulled treacherously at every step, and the snow-covered path offered little traction. Several times people slipped and would have fallen badly if not for the quick reactions of those nearby. When William lost his footing on a particularly steep section, Sarah's heart stopped as he began to slide toward a drop-off. Before she could even cry out, Talisi's son, Adohi, lunged forward, catching the boy's coat and hauling him back to safety. The incident reinforced the wisdom of the Cherokee's careful organization of their traveling party. "Sorry, Ma," William whispered, shaken by his near miss. "I was careful, truly." "I know," Sarah assured him, holding him close for a moment before they continued. "Just stay closer to Adohi now. Hold his hand if he offers it." As the afternoon light began to fade, the path gradually widened, the descent becoming less precipitous. Through breaks in the forest canopy, Sarah caught glimpses of a valley spread below them, sheltered by surrounding peaks, with a ribbon of unfrozen water visible at its center. "Our destination?" she asked Waleha, who nodded in confirmation. "Hidden valley, not on white men's maps, known only to Cherokee for many generations." By the time they reached the valley floor, dusk had settled fully across the landscape, yet rather than making camp as they had on previous nights, the procession continued, toward a cluster of structures barely visible in the gathering darkness. "Others here already?" Sarah asked, surprised. "Yes," Talisi explained as they walked. "Small group came earlier before the first snow, prepared basic shelters, gathered firewood, set traps for the game, makes arrival easier for the main group." The foresight impressed Sarah, though by now she had come to expect such careful planning from the Cherokee. Nothing was left to chance when survival hung in the balance. As they approached the settlement, figures emerged from the structures, calling welcome in Cherokee. The atmosphere shifted from determined endurance to celebration. They had arrived, safely completed their journey, and reached sanctuary. Warm fires already burned in stone circles, and the scent of cooking meat greeted the weary travelers. Children who had been stoic throughout the difficult day suddenly found renewed energy, running forward to greet friends and relatives who had arrived earlier. A tall Cherokee man with streaks of grey in his long hair approached Talisi, clasping forearms in greeting before turning his attention to the entire group. "Welcome to Anivuia," he announced in both Cherokee and English, "the place of the real people. Your new home." As Sarah stood with her sons at the threshold of this new chapter in their lives, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. grief for all they had left behind, anxiety for the uncertain future, but predominantly a profound gratitude. The path that had led them here had been marked by loss and hardship, but also by unexpected kindness and a community that had expanded to include 4 strangers in its protective embrace. "We're home," she whispered to her sons, the words both a reassurance and a commitment to the life they would build in this hidden valley among people who had become far more than mere benefactors. James slipped his hand into hers, while William leaned against her side and Henry drowsed on her hip, the family unit complete and intact despite all they had endured. As the Cherokee community welcomed them into the circle of light and warmth at the center of the settlement, Sarah Reed, now also Enola Black Fox, took the first steps into their new life. Spring came late to Hidden Valley, the high elevation, keeping snow on the ground long after it would have melted in the lowlands. For Sarah and her sons, those first months in their new home passed in a blur of adaptation and learning. The temporary shelters of their arrival gradually gave way to more permanent structures as the community established itself, each family contributing to the construction of others' homes before their own. By the time the first green shoots emerged from the thawing earth, the Reeds occupied a small but sturdy cabin built in the Cherokee style. Round logs chinked with clay and moss, a stone fireplace dominating one wall, a smoke hole in the peaked roof. It stood among similar dwellings, arranged in a rough circle around a central communal area, the entire settlement nestled in a natural bowl of land protected by steep mountainsides. The valley proved to be well chosen. A spring-fed stream provided clean water year-round. Hunting was plentiful once the snow retreated enough for men to range farther into the surrounding forests. South-facing slopes offered ideal conditions for the limited agriculture the community would attempt at this elevation. Sarah stood at the door of their cabin one April morning, watching as her sons joined other children in clearing stones from a patch of ground that would become a communal garden. The winter had changed them all. James at 7 had grown taller, leaner, his movements confident as he directed younger children in their tasks. At 5, William had lost some of his restless energy, channeling it instead into focused learning of Cherokee skills that suited his active nature. Even Henry, now 3, had transformed from a clingy toddler into a sturdy little boy who followed the older children everywhere, absorbing 2 languages simultaneously with the remarkable adaptability of the very young. "They become Cherokee." "Quickly," observed Ayasta, who had approached silently to stand beside Sarah. The elder woman's health had suffered during the journey and subsequent winter, but her spirit remained indomitable. "Yes and no," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "They're learning new ways, but they still remember their father, still ask questions about where we came from." Ayasta nodded approvingly. "Good. They should know both paths. The Cherokee way is not to forget ancestors, but to bring their strength forward into new challenges." The wisdom resonated with Sarah, who had struggled with how to honor Thomas's memory while embracing their new life. She had feared that adaptation might mean erasure, but the Cherokee perspective offered an alternative: integration rather than replacement. "The garden will be planted soon," Ayasta continued, changing the subject. "You brought seeds from your old home." Sarah nodded. During those desperate days after Thomas failed to return, she had carefully preserved their seed stock even as food. Supplies dwindled, understanding instinctively that seeds represented future survival. "Squash, beans, a few tomatoes," she confirmed, "and some herbs, rosemary, thyme, mint. Good medicines," Ayasta approved. "Different from Cherokee plants, but good. You will teach our healers, they will teach you. Knowledge grows like a garden, when shared." The exchange typified the pragmatic approach the Cherokee community had adopted towards Sarah's presence among them. Her differences weren't merely tolerated, but valued for the new perspectives and skills they brought. In turn, Sarah had embraced Cherokee knowledge with humble eagerness, recognizing that her frontier skills, while substantial, had significant gaps when it came to surviving in this remote mountain environment. The sound of dogs barking interrupted their conversation. From the settlement's edge, voices called out in Cherokee. The hunting party was returning. Sarah recognized Tallassie's distinctive call among them, the signal that the hunt had been successful. Children abandoned their garden work, running toward the returning hunters. Sarah followed more sedately with Ayasta, helping the elder woman navigate the uneven ground. By the time they reached the gathering crowd, the hunters had laid out their bounty, 2 deer and a black bear, the latter a particularly welcome find after the winter's depletion of fat reserves. Talassie acknowledged, Sarah with a nod as she approached. Over the months, a quiet understanding had developed between them, not quite friendship in the way she would have defined it in her previous life, but a mutual respect founded on shared challenges overcome. "Good hunt," he stated simply, though the pride in his voice was evident. Beside him stood James, carrying a string of rabbits almost as tall as himself. "Tsu helped set snares," Talassie explained, using James's Cherokee name. "Has good hands, patient spirit, caught more than grown. Men." James's face glowed with the praise, though he maintained the serious expression he had increasingly adopted, emulating the Cherokee men he admired. "The rabbits were hungry after winter," he explained to his mother, "made them less careful." "An excellent observation," Sarah commended him, carefully balancing respect for his achievement with the maternal instinct to shelter him from growing up too quickly. At 7, James stood at a precarious threshold between childhood and the earlier maturity frontier life demanded. The successful hunt triggered a flurry of activity throughout the settlement. The animals would provide not only meat, but essential materials: hides for clothing and shelter, sinew for thread, bones for tools and needles. Nothing would be wasted. A principle Sarah had always practiced from necessity, but which the Cherokee elevated to spiritual significance. As women gathered to begin the butchering process, Sarah joined them naturally, finding her place in the workflow. The months of shared labor had taught her Cherokee methods that often proved more efficient than those she had known before. She worked now alongside women who had become, if not friends in the traditional sense, then comrades in the daily business of survival. Unol, whose initial sternness had gradually given way to grudging approval, directed the process with brisk efficiency. "Inola," she called, using Sarah's Cherokee name, "you and Waleha take the small deer. Your boys need new moccasins before planting season." The casual assignment of the hide acknowledged Sarah's improved leatherworking skills developed under Waleha's patient tutelage through the winter months. What had begun as a practical necessity, the children's American-style shoes had quickly worn out on the mountain terrain, had revealed an aptitude Sarah hadn't known she possessed. As the women worked, conversation flowed around Sarah in a mixture of Cherokee and English. Though far from fluent, she had acquired enough Cherokee vocabulary to follow discussions and contribute when appropriate. In turn, several women had expressed interest in improving their English, creating an informal language exchange that benefited all involved. "Adohi says soldiers came to the old village," Unega mentioned as they worked, referring to news brought by scouts who periodically traveled back to maintain contact with those who had remained behind. The statement immediately captured everyone's attention. News from the outside world was rare and precious in their isolated valley. "When?" Waleha asked sharply. "Full moon after we left," Unega replied. "Raccoon showed them papers, said most Cherokee already gone west. Soldiers searched, found nothing. Suspicious." Her expression darkened. But they said they would return when it snows, looking for any who hide from removal. Sarah felt the familiar twist of conflicted loyalty in her stomach. The soldiers Unega spoke of were men of her own race, perhaps even from her own region, enforcing policies she had never questioned until experiencing their impact firsthand. "Did anyone follow our trail?" she asked, the practical concern uppermost in her mind. Unega shook her head. "Snow-covered paths. And Raccoon sent them south, told the story of another village in that direction." She smiled grimly. "Old Fox knows how to confuse hunters." The news brought both relief and renewed vigilance to the community. They were safe for now, hidden by winter and terrain, but the outside world had not forgotten them. The pressure driving Cherokee people westward continued unabated. That evening, as was their custom since establishing the new settlement, the community gathered around the central fire to share the day's news and stories. These gatherings served multiple purposes: reinforcing community bonds, educating the young, preserving cultural knowledge, and making collective decisions. Tonight's discussion focused primarily on the information from the old village and what it might mean for their future. Sarah sat with her sons at the edge of the circle, listening as various perspectives were shared in both Cherokee and English, the latter a courtesy extended for her benefit. The tall, grey-haired man she had met upon arrival, whose name she now knew was Kanati, spoke with the authority of experience. "We remain safe here for now. Passes still blocked by snow will stay that way until late spring. By then, the garden was planted, hunting good, food stored. We can survive here indefinitely if needed." Others were less optimistic. A warrior named Askuk argued forcefully that they should prepare for eventual discovery. White man's hunger for land never satisfied. Today they say, "Go west." Tomorrow they come to the mountains. We should prepare to fight if necessary. Voices rose in agreement and disagreement, the Cherokee Council process allowing each perspective its hearing without rushing to judgment. Sarah listened carefully, understanding now the nuances of the discussion in ways she couldn't have months earlier. When Ayasta finally turned to her and asked, "What does Inola think?" "She knows white men's ways." Sarah considered her response thoughtfully. "The soldiers follow orders," she began slowly. "Most don't question why they remove Cherokee. They simply do as told by the government." She paused, aware of the weight of her words. But not all white people agree with removal. There are those who speak against it, write against it, even bring cases to courts. Courts that decide against Cherokee regardless. Askuk interjected bitterly. "Often, yes," Sarah acknowledged, refusing to offer false hope. "But disagreement grows, and the more white people who meet Cherokee know Cherokee as people, not just savages," supplied Degatoga with a grim smile. "As people," Sarah continued firmly, "the harder it becomes to support removal. That's why stories matter. Stories change minds where arguments fail." A thoughtful silence followed her words. Finally, Kanati spoke again. "So we survive. We persist. And perhaps one day our stories reach enough ears that we may live in peace." The pragmatic approach resonated with the community's temperament. No false hopes, no dramatic stands, simply the determination to endure that had sustained the Cherokee through previous upheavals. As the meeting concluded and families drifted back to their dwellings, Talassi approached Sarah as she gathered. "Her sleepy sons, your words were wise," he said simply. "You see both sides of the mountain now, not just one." The compliment warmed her. "I'm trying to understand. For my son's sake, if nothing else, they will live in both worlds." Talassi nodded, his gaze moving to where James helped a drowsy Henry to his feet. "Tsiu especially. He has a Cherokee heart in white body." His expression grew serious. "When he is grown, he may be a bridge between peoples. Important role, but difficult. The observation gave voice to something Sarah had sensed, but not fully articulated. Her eldest son was being shaped by these experiences in profound ways that would influence his entire life. He was neither fully of her world nor fully of the Cherokees, but something new forged at the intersection of both. "I worry for him sometimes," she admitted. "For all of them. Will they ever truly belong anywhere?" "They belong here now," Talasi replied firmly. "Later they choose their path. That is a gift you give them, a choice that many do not have." His words stayed with Sarah as she settled her sons for the night in their small cabin. The boys fell asleep quickly, exhausted from a day of physical labor and play. Sarah remained awake longer, sorting through clothing that needed mending by the light of a small fire. The quiet domesticity of the moment struck her suddenly. How ordinary it felt now to sit in a Cherokee-built cabin, using sinew thread to mend buckskin leggings, the scent of pine smoke and herbs hanging from the rafters filling the air. The life that had once seemed so strange had become normal, comfortable even. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Waleha standing outside, a small bundle in her hands. "May I enter?" the Cherokee woman asked. The formal request, a courtesy Sarah had come to appreciate. Of course, Sarah welcomed her, moving aside to make room near the fire. Waleha settled cross-legged on the floor, placing her bundle between them. "I bring a gift," she explained, unwrapping. "A collection of small cloth pouches filled with seeds. Cherokee plants for your garden, good medicine, good food." Sarah examined the offerings with genuine appreciation. Corn of a variety she hadn't seen before, beans, unfamiliar herbs, and several types of squash. "Thank you," she said, understanding the significance of the gift. Seeds represented not just food, but heritage, the accumulated agricultural knowledge of generations. "You bring white seeds to our garden," Waleha explained. "We give Cherokee seeds to you. Together they grow stronger." She hesitated, then added, "Like our children growing together." The simple metaphor encapsulated what their unusual community was attempting, not the erasure of differences, but their integration into something resilient and adaptive. "I've been meaning to ask," Sarah ventured, seizing the moment of connection, "about planting. In the settlement where I grew up, we had certain rituals for planting time, ways to ensure a good harvest." Waleha's expression brightened with interest. "Tell me." "We would plant certain crops by the phases of the moon," Sarah explained. "Root vegetables during the waning moon, above-ground crops during the waxing moon, and there were songs." She hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. "Cherokee also planted by the moon," Waleha confirmed eagerly. "Have special ceremonies for first planting, for first harvest. Songs to ask the Creator for blessing." She leaned forward. "You will teach your ways. I will teach Cherokee ways. Next moon is the planting ceremony. Your family will participate." The invitation represented another step in their integration. Not just practical cooperation, but inclusion in spiritual and cultural practices. Sarah accepted with appropriate seriousness, recognizing both the honor and the responsibility it entailed. As Waleha prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Tomorrow we begin preparing garden soil. Bring boys early. Much work, but many hands make work lighter." Alone again, Sarah added the seed pouches to her own carefully preserved collection. The combined varieties would give their community greater resilience against crop failure, another example of how diversity strengthened rather than weakened their chances of survival. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars blazing with the particular brilliance unique to mountain elevations. Sarah stepped outside briefly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she gazed up at the familiar constellations, unchanging reference points in a life transformed in almost every other way. A movement caught her eye, a figure standing at the edge of the settlement, similarly contemplating the night sky. Even at a distance, she recognized Talisie's distinctive silhouette. He stood motionless, perhaps engaged in private communion with the spirits his people believed inhabited every aspect of the natural world. Sarah watched for a moment, struck by the parallel paths that had brought them all to this hidden valley. Her family fleeing death by starvation, his people fleeing cultural extinction, both refusing to surrender to forces that would destroy them, both finding unexpected allies in what had once been considered other. As she returned to her cabin and the sleeping children within, Sarah reflected on the strange alchemy of circumstance that had transformed potential tragedy into an improbable new beginning. The winter that had threatened to take everything from her had instead led her to a community that valued resilience above all qualities, exactly what she and her sons would need for whatever challenges lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring its labor and concerns, its small triumphs and setbacks. But for this moment, in this sheltered valley high above the world that had both rejected and forgotten them, Sarah allowed herself to feel something she had thought lost forever in that snow-bound cabin months ago. Hope. Summer transformed Hidden Valley into a verdant paradise. The communal gardens flourished under careful tending, streams teemed with fish, and the surrounding forests yielded berries, herbs, and game in abundance. For the first time since Thomas's death, Sarah felt the constant knot of anxiety about survival begin to loosen. The summer solstice brought the green corn ceremony, a sacred Cherokee tradition that marked the ripening of the first corn. Though normally closed to outsiders, the community had decided after much deliberation to include Sarah and her sons in the ritual. "It is not done lightly," Ayusta explained, as she helped Sarah prepare. "But you are no longer outside the circle. Your corn grows with ours, your hands tend to the same soil, your children speak our language." Sarah understood the profound honor being extended. Throughout the preceding months, she had observed the deeply spiritual relationship the Cherokee maintained with the natural world, not as separate dominion, but as integrated participants in a complex web of relationships. This ceremony represented their acceptance into that sacred understanding. James and William had been taken by Talisie and other men to prepare separately. Henry, deemed too young for full participation, would remain with Sarah. As dusk approached, Waleha arrived to escort them to the ceremonial grounds, a natural clearing some distance from the settlement. "Wear this," Waleha instructed, presenting Sarah with a deerskin dress adorned with simple beadwork. "Clothing made by Cherokee hands, from Cherokee animals, connects you to land and people." The dress felt strange after months of wearing her. Adapted frontier clothing, but Sarah appreciated its symbolic importance. As they approached the gathering, drums already pulsing through the twilight air, she felt a momentary hesitation. Was this betrayal of her own faith, her own traditions? Ayusta, seemingly sensing her conflict, touched her arm gently. "Creator has many names, many faces. Cherokee do not ask you to forget your God, only recognize he speaks in many voices, including through corn that feeds your children." The wisdom settled Sarah's unease. Her faith had always been practical rather than dogmatic, focused on living honorably more than theological precision. What matters if God was thanked in Cherokee or English, through corn or bread? The ceremony itself was unlike anything in Sarah's experience, vibrant with movement, music, communal expression, rather than passive observance. When she spotted James and William among the men, their faces painted with ceremonial symbols, she barely recognized them. James's expression carried a gravity beyond his years, while William for once mirrored his brother's solemnity. Afterward, as the community shared a feast of early summer produce, Sarah found herself seated beside Kanati, whose role as spiritual leader had become apparent during the ceremony. "Your son's participated well," he commented. "Especially Tsu. He listens. With heart, not just ears." "He's changing," Sarah acknowledged, watching as James sat among Cherokee boys his age, their conversation animated despite switching fluidly between languages. "Sometimes I wonder if he remembers his life before." Kanati studied the boy thoughtfully. "He remembers. But children see the truth adults forget, that life is always changing, like a river. Fighting change brings suffering. Accepting change brings growth." The conversation shifted as Dagotoga approached with news. Scouts had returned from another monitoring mission to the lower elevations. The men gathered quickly to hear the report, with Sarah and other women joining the circle as equal participants in matters affecting community safety. "Soldiers establish a new fort in the valley 2 days' journey south," Dagotoga reported grimly. "Many men, many weapons. They send patrols into mountains, searching for Cherokee who avoid removal." The news cast a shadow over the celebration. Talasy spoke what many were thinking. Hidden Valley remains safe only if hidden. One captured hunter, one discovered trail could lead them here. Debate ensued about appropriate responses, restrict hunting territories, establish warning systems, relocate yet again. Sarah listened carefully before offering her perspective when asked. "The fort's presence suggests they believe significant numbers remain in these mountains. They won't abandon the search quickly." She hesitated, then added, "But soldiers follow patterns, schedules. Learning these patterns could help avoid encounters." Her suggestion sparked a practical plan. Increased scouting missions to observe the soldiers' movements without engaging them, identifying safe corridors for necessary hunting and gathering expeditions, and establishing hidden observation posts at strategic points. "Enola thinks like a warrior," Askuk commented with grudging approval, using her Cherokee name. The compliment startled Sarah, who had never considered herself in such terms. Yet survival here required strategic thinking, risk assessment, adaptation, skills she had developed through necessity rather than training. As summer progressed into autumn, the community implemented their vigilance plan while simultaneously preparing for winter. The first harvest exceeded expectations, game was plentiful, and methods for preserving food occupied everyone's days. The children divided their time between practical education, hunting, gathering, processing, and traditional learning. And from tribal elders, Sarah watched with mixed emotions as her sons absorbed Cherokee ways. James could now move through the forest as silently as Talasy. William had developed uncanny skill at locating edible plants, and even little Henry chatted in Cherokee as easily as English. Their transformation was both wonderful and worrying. How would they ever reintegrate into white society if circumstances changed? One crisp October afternoon, as Sarah worked with other women smoking fish for winter storage, Unol approached with uncharacteristic urgency. "Hunters returning early," she reported tersely. "Spotted white men too close to hidden trails." The women immediately secured the food processing area and gathered children playing nearby. By the time the hunting party reached the settlement, everyone was prepared for potential evacuation if necessary. Talasy led the returning group, his expression grave. "White trappers, not soldiers," he reported to the quickly assembled council. 3 men following beaver streams. They camp in the lower valley, but the track leads them upward each day. "Trappers notice signs others miss," Kanati observed. "Nature of their work." "If they discover our valley?" asked Waleha, voicing everyone's concern. "Depends on men," Talasy replied honestly. "Some trappers respect Cherokee, trade fairly, and keep secrets. Others would report to authorities for reward." Sarah considered the dilemma, remembering Thomas's interactions with trappers who occasionally visited their homestead. "Trappers care about pelts, not politics," she offered. "If they could be approached carefully, perhaps an arrangement." The suggestion was controversial. Direct contact carried obvious risks, yet allowing the trappers to potentially stumble upon their settlement might prove more dangerous. After lengthy debate, a compromise emerged. The trappers would be observed for several days to assess their character and intentions. If they seemed reasonable, Talasy and two others would approach them openly, offering limited trading opportunities in exchange for discretion. Enola should go too, Talasy started unexpectedly. White woman with Cherokee shows unusual situation, makes them curious rather than threatened. The proposal stunned Sarah. Me? But I've never... You know white men's thinking, Talasy interrupted. Can judge their honesty. And they see women with children thinking less about war, more about humanity. The strategy was sound, if uncomfortable. 3 days later, having observed the trappers' behavior and determined they were not affiliated with the military, Sarah found herself preparing for her first encounter with white men since leaving her cabin nearly a year earlier. "You're certain about this?" she asked Talasy as they made final preparations. "No certainty in such matters," he replied frankly. "Only calculated risk, but Enola has proven good judgment. I trust your instincts." The trust humbled her. As Sarah prepared to temporarily leave Hidden Valley for this diplomatic mission, she reflected on how thoroughly her life had transformed. From desperate widow facing starvation to valued member of a Cherokee community, from passive recipient of charity to active participant in their collective survival, whatever came from this encounter with the outside world, she knew with bone-deep certainty that Hidden Valley was now home, its people now family, in all the ways that truly mattered. Dawn painted the mountain peaks gold as Sarah, Talasy, and two Cherokee warriors named Doublehead and Black Fox departed Hidden Valley. They traveled light, carrying only essential provisions, trade goods, and weapons kept deliberately unobtrusive. Sarah wore a careful blend of her original frontier clothing and Cherokee-made garments, a visual representation of her dual existence. The journey to the trappers' camp required stealth and caution. They followed game trails when possible, avoiding the more established paths that might indicate regular human presence. Sarah found herself moving with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a year earlier, navigating the steep terrain with practiced ease. "You walk like Cherokee now," Doublehead observed during a brief rest, "not heavy like white people." The simple comment highlighted how thoroughly survival in these mountains had transformed her. Months of necessity had rewritten her movements, her awareness, her very relationship with the landscape around her. By midday, they reached an observation point overlooking the valley where the trappers had established their camp. From their concealed position among boulders, they studied the three men going about their work below, checking traps along the stream, stretching beaver pelts on frames, repairing equipment. "What do you see?" Talasy asked Sarah quietly. She observed carefully before responding. "Experienced woodsmen, well-equipped but not extravagant. They work efficiently together, suggesting a long partnership." She pointed to the oldest man, whose beard was streaked with grey. "That one's the leader. See how the others defer to him?" Talasy nodded approval at her assessment. "Good. We approached him directly then. More respect shown, more respect given." He turned to Sarah with unusual directness. "You speak first. Your presence will surprise them most, create opportunity before they decide how to react." The strategy made sense, though it placed significant responsibility on Sarah's shoulders. As they made their final approach, descending through sparse woodland toward the open area of the camp, she mentally rehearsed her opening words. The grey-bearded trapper spotted them first, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle propped against a nearby tree. His companions tensed, abandoning their tasks as they noticed the approaching party. "That's far enough," the older man called, when they were still 20 paces away, his voice gruff with suspicion. Sarah stepped slightly forward, deliberately empty-handed, her posture non-threatening. "We come in peace," she called clearly. a talk, perhaps to trade. The unexpected sound of a woman's voice, and a white woman at that, created the precise effect Tallassee had anticipated. The trapper's expressions shifted from wariness to confusion. "Ma'am." The leader squinted as if doubting his eyes. "What in God's name are you doing out here with—" He gestured vaguely toward her Cherokee companions. "My name is Sarah Reed," she replied, using her birth name deliberately. "These are my friends and neighbors. We noticed your camp and thought we might establish friendly relations." The simplicity of her statement clearly disarmed him. After a moment's hesitation, he lowered his rifle slightly. "Samuel Blackwood," he introduced himself gruffly. "These are my partners, Jim Coulter and Eli Finch." The younger men nodded cautiously, their eyes still fixed warily on the Cherokee warriors. "May we approach and speak properly?" Sarah asked. "We've brought some items to trade if you're interested." Blackwood hesitated, then nodded. "Come ahead slowly, but the Injuns keep their distance." Sarah turned to translate this condition to Tallassee, though she knew he understood English perfectly. Well, this theatrical moment allowed him to nod graciously, as if accepting a reasonable request rather than enduring an insult. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance of diplomacy. Sarah explained her presence with a carefully edited version of the truth, a widow with children rescued by Cherokee during winter, now living among them voluntarily. She conveyed that their community wished to remain undisturbed in the mountains, far from settlements and soldiers alike. "So you're telling me there's a whole village of Cherokee hiding out there?" Blackwood asked, gesturing toward the higher elevations. "I'm telling you there are families, women, children, elders, who only wish to live peacefully in the lands they've always known," Sarah replied evenly. "They've harmed no one, stolen nothing, made no trouble." Blackwood's weathered face revealed little as he considered this information. "The Army's got a new fort down south," he mentioned casually, "offering rewards for information about Cherokee, avoiding removal." "I'm aware," Sarah acknowledged, maintaining steady eye contact. "The question is whether such rewards would let you sleep soundly, knowing what would happen to those families." The directness of her challenge seemed to earn his respect. He snorted softly. "Been trapping these mountains for 30 years, ma'am. Knew Cherokee before most white folks ever set foot here. Never had trouble with them that wasn't started by whites first." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, though she kept her expression neutral. "Then perhaps we can reach an understanding beneficial to all." The negotiation proceeded in earnest then. The Cherokee offered knowledge of prime beaver streams in exchange for the trappers' silence about their presence. Additionally, they proposed limited trading, herbs and crafts unavailable elsewhere for ammunition and metal tools. After conferring privately with his partners, Blackwood agreed to these terms with one additional request. "Come spring, we might bring specific trading requests. Items from settlements we can't easily get ourselves." Sarah translated this proposal to Tallassee, who considered it briefly before nodding. "Acceptable if meeting places established away from the village." As they concluded their agreement, sealed. With an exchange of initial goods, Blackwood regarded Sarah with undisguised curiosity. "Your children," he began, then hesitated. "Are healthy and happy," she completed firmly, "and learning to survive in ways that will serve them well in this world." "The world's changing, ma'am," Blackwood observed. "Might not always be enough. Hills to hide in. Then we'll face that change when it comes," Sarah replied simply. "Together." The encounter had gone better than she had dared hope. As they departed, maintaining a deliberately misleading direction until well out of sight of the trappers' camp, Sarah felt the tension she'd been carrying begin to ease. "You spoke well," Tallassee commented, as they began the climb back toward Hidden Valley. "Trappers respect strength, honesty. You showed both." "Do you think they'll honor the agreement?" Sarah asked. "Man like Blackwood?" "Yes." Talassy's expression held rare approval. He has seen too much, knows government promises, worth little. Men who live in the wilderness understand respect for others' territories. The successful diplomatic mission elevated Sarah's standing within the community even further. The council listened intently to their report, approving the arrangements made and the potential for limited ongoing trade. More significantly, Sarah noted how naturally her opinion was sought throughout the discussion, her insights valued alongside those of lifelong Cherokee. As early winter settled once more over Hidden Valley, the community's second year in their mountain sanctuary took on a different character than the first. No longer focused solely on basic survival and establishment, they could turn attention to refinements, improving dwellings, expanding food cultivation techniques, developing more effective tools from available materials. For Sarah and her sons, this period marked a deepening integration into Cherokee life. James now regularly joined hunting parties, his marksmanship with a Cherokee bow rivaling that of boys years older. William's boundless energy found purpose in learning traditional games that simultaneously taught combat skills and strategic thinking. Even Henry, now 4, participated in community life with complete confidence, moving between languages and cultural practices with the fluid adaptability of childhood. On a crisp December morning, exactly 1 year after they had first arrived, in Hidden Valley, Sarah stood at the edge of the frozen stream, watching ice crystals form intricate patterns along the banks. Snow dusted the surrounding forest, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland, not unlike the one that had nearly claimed their lives 2 winters earlier. "You're thoughtful today," observed Waleha, joining her with a bundle of kindling tucked under one arm. "Remembering," Sarah acknowledged. "1 year ago we were strangers here, scared, uncertain." Waleha nodded, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Now not strangers, now family." The simple statement encompassed a profound truth. What had begun as desperate charity had evolved into genuine kinship, bonds formed through shared labor, meals, celebrations, dangers, and the 1,000 daily interactions that weave humans into community. "I never thanked you properly," Sarah said suddenly. "You and Talasy, for finding us that day, for bringing us here. My sons would have died." Waleha's expression remained serene. "No thanks needed between family. Would you not do the same for my children if needed?" Without hesitation, Sarah confirmed, the answer coming instantly and truthfully. Then the circle is complete. Waleha adjusted her bundle and gestured toward the settlement. "Come, Winter Council begins soon. Your voice is needed." The Winter Council was a Cherokee tradition, a time for reflecting on the year past and planning for the seasons ahead. The entire community gathered in the largest lodge, where a fire blazed in the central pit, warming the space and illuminating faces gathered in a great circle. Kanati, whose role as spiritual leader had grown more pronounced as the settlement stabilized, opened the proceedings with traditional prayers and acknowledgments of the spirits that sustained them. Then Ayasta, increasingly frail but sharp-minded as ever, called upon various members to share observations and concerns. Reports came from hunters about game migrations and populations, from those tending gardens about soil conditions and seed viability, from scouts monitoring activities in distant valleys. The community listened attentively, building a collective understanding of their situation and surroundings. When Sarah's turn came to speak, she found herself unexpectedly emotional. "A year ago, I sat in this circle as an outsider, uncertain of my place or my children's future. Today, I speak as Enola, as a member of this community that has become our true home." Murmurs of approval rippled through the gathering. Sarah continued, "My sons thrive here in ways they never could have in the world I came from. James Tsiu grows not just in height but in wisdom, learning to balance action with thought. William, wire, channels his wild spirit into useful skills rather than mere mischief. Henry, our we, knows nothing but acceptance and belonging. She paused, gathering her thoughts. My gratitude can never be fully expressed, but perhaps it can be demonstrated through continued service to this community that has given us everything. As the council progressed, Talasy introduced an unexpected topic, the possibility of limited contact with select white allies. Trappers keep agreement, he reported. Trade is beneficial. Perhaps others exist who could be trusted. Healers needing plants we gather, traders seeking crafts without government knowledge. The proposal sparked intense debate. Some, like Askuk, argued forcefully against any expansion of outside contact. Each new person who knows of Hidden Valley brings risk, he insisted. Safety lies in secrecy. Others, including Kanati, saw potential benefits that outweigh the dangers. Cherokee have always traded with others. Isolation brings weakness over. In time, new tools, new knowledge lost to us. The discussion continued late into the night, passionate but respectful in the Cherokee way. Sarah listened carefully, offering her perspective when appropriate, but never presuming her opinion should carry more weight due to her understanding of white society. Near midnight, as the council neared conclusion, Ayasta turned to Sarah with unexpected directness. Enola walks between worlds now, sees with double vision. What future do you see for Hidden Valley, for Cherokee who remain in ancestors' lands? The question silenced the gathering. Sarah felt the weight of all eyes upon her, understanding the honor and responsibility inherent in being asked to speak on matters so fundamental to the community's future. I see no easy path, she began honestly. The government's determination to remove all Cherokee seems unchanged. Yet history teaches that nothing remains fixed forever. Policies shift, attitudes evolve, new understandings emerge. She gestured to the circle around her. This community has proven it can survive in these mountains, hidden from those who would destroy it. That survival itself is victory. Each child born here, each elder who passes naturally rather than on forced march, each season completed in traditional ways, preserves what might otherwise be lost. Her gaze moved to where her sons sat among Cherokee children, indistinguishable in the firelight. And perhaps, in generations to come, those who bridge both worlds, Cherokee and white, might help create understanding where now there is only fear and prejudice. Ayasta nodded slowly, her ancient eyes reflecting the firelight. Good vision, not easy, not perfect, but true. She looked around the gathering. We continue then, we endure, we remain Cherokee in these mountains, adapting when necessary but never surrendering what makes us people. As the council dispersed in the deep of night, families returning to their dwellings beneath a canopy of brilliant stars, Sarah walked with her sons through the silent, snow-covered settlement. James carried a sleeping Henry on his back, while William trudged beside them, unusually contemplative after participating in his first full council. Ma, William asked suddenly, are we Cherokee now? Or still white people? The question stopped Sarah in her tracks. She knelt before her middle son, bringing them face to face in the starlight. We are who we choose to be, William. Some would say we can only be what we were born, but I believe people can grow, change, become more than what they began as. She brushed snow from his hair with gentle fingers. You and your brothers have learned Cherokee ways, Cherokee words, Cherokee values. Those things are now part of you, just as your memories of your father and our cabin are part of you. William considered this seriously. So we're both? Yes, Sarah confirmed. Both, and that is a gift, not a burden. You can understand things others cannot because you see with different eyes. Satisfied with this answer, William continued toward their cabin. But James lingered behind with Sarah, Henry still sleeping against his shoulder. "That's not the whole truth, is it, Ma?" he asked quietly, his perceptions startling her. "People won't let us be both. They'll make us choose." The insight from her 7-year-old son pierced Sarah deeply. "Some will try," she acknowledged, "but you'll find others who understand, who value bridges instead of walls between peoples." James nodded, his young face solemn in the moonlight. "Like Talasi and Waleha, like you." "Yes," Sarah agreed softly, "like us." As they entered their cabin, now snug against winter's bite with improvements made throughout the year, Sarah settled her children for sleep. The rhythms of their lives had aligned with Cherokee patterns, rising and resting with natural light, attuned to seasonal changes, connected to the world around them in ways her previous life had never taught. Outside, light snow began to fall, adding fresh powder to the blanket already covering Hidden Valley. The same snow that had once threatened to entomb her family now felt like a protective veil, obscuring their sanctuary from those who would disturb its peace. Sarah added wood to their small fire, watching the flames catch and grow. 2 winters earlier, she had been Sarah Reed, a frontier wife with conventional dreams and limited horizons. Now she was also Enola, Black Fox, a woman transformed by necessity and choice into someone who walked between worlds, helping forge connections where others saw only divisions. The journey had begun in desperate circumstances, a mother and 3 sons abandoned by fate to freeze in an uncaring wilderness. It had led them to this improbable sanctuary, this community that had expanded its circle to include strangers in need. And whatever challenges lay ahead, whether from soldiers, settlers, or the inevitable changes time would bring, they would face them not as victims or outsiders, but as family. In the soft light of the dying fire, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude, part Cherokee blessing, part Christian devotion, wholly authentic to the woman she had become. The prayer acknowledged the Creator who walked alongside humans, whatever names they used, the spirits that inhabited the natural world that sustained them, and the ancestors, both Cherokee and her own, who had passed wisdom through generations, that enabled survival against all odds. Here in this hidden valley, an abandoned frontier mother and her 3 sons had found not just rescue from winter's deadly grasp, but a new definition of home, one built not of logs and chinking, but of shared purpose, mutual respect, and the courage to imagine a different way of living in a divided world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.